Hello, my name is Christopher Busch, and this is my project for Practicum 2, Socio-Economic Determinants of Mortality. What is the problem? Well, life and death is a major concern for everyone. The Rural Health Reform Policy Research Center says that mortality rates are actually worse in rural areas, and they vary by region. So there are cultural and health behaviors that impact those mortality rates. So could action on the county level impact and reduce mortality? One of the reasons why I chose Regis University is because of the spirit of giving and providing service. Through that end, reducing mortality is one of the key things that affect all of us. Now, in this project, obviously age-related deterioration is a major factor for mortality, but social expenditures are associated with better outcomes. And spending does make a difference. For example, with the Medicaid expansions took place, mortality was reduced by nearly 20 people per 100,000 adults. Also, the Affordable Care Act provides for patient navigators who cut through red tape and help patients in need. Many hospitals are using patient navigators to also help patients find housing and other social concerns. Since funding is scarce, especially given the recent tax cuts, which expenditures are most needed? Now, to accomplish this project, 4 data sources were used: IRS statistics, county health rankings, Centers for Disease Control, and census information. The IRS provided information about wages, and the county health rankings provided a wide breadth of social and economic characteristics of the counties. And the Centers for Disease Control, they had public use files about mortality. And the census information was critical in gathering consistent and reliable health insurance estimates per county. What about the data? In order to account for age, 3 age groups are studied independently: senior citizens, working adults, and children. Now, one thing that's very interesting about mortality is that it is a Bernoulli process. Imagine that each resident is a trial, and death is a failure, and continued life is a success. In this way, the Grim Reaper rolls dice for all of us. Another challenge with the data is that counties with less than 10 deaths that occurred in a particular age group are not included due to privacy. So this can be seen in the data completeness by age group. Notice that the youth age group, only 46% of the counties have data associated with it. Another aspect that you'll see is that there is clipping for those age groups in which there are less than 10 deaths. Several methods are utilized in this project: Windsorization for capping outliers, imputation, which is filling in the blanks, feature selection. Now, one key thing about the feature selection is that only those features that can be changed through social activism are included. But beyond that, decision trees, cross-validation, and a test holdout set are all used to hone in on the important feature selections. And for modeling, decision trees, k-means clustering, as well as linear regression to help explain the variables is utilized. What are the current mortality rates for the United States? You can see here that for senior citizens, those who live in the rural areas have a higher deaths per population in the age group they live in than other areas. But one of the things is that these death rates can be somewhat misleading because counties with very low populations could exaggerate that death rate. And to account for that, Windsorization was utilized. Another issue is the sparsity of data. So the youth death rates, since it has to be above a certain threshold, in other words 10 per age group, a lot of the data isn't reported due to privacy concerns. Looking at the important variables for senior citizens, adult obesity percentages are at the top, as obesity accounts for 30% of the variance in the mortality rates. In addition, physical activity is very important. Obviously, that is used to get the obesity rates down. Interestingly, even a college degree can help with mortality. Hopefully, my master's degree will help me. Looking at the senior citizen decision tree, we can see that exercise, eliminating unnecessary hospital stays, and even reducing unemployment is very important. The text view of the tree is perhaps easier to read. You can see that highlighted in green is reducing obesity improves mortality rates for senior citizens. And then interestingly, the one in yellow, social associations rate, is actually counter-indicated for mortality rates. Perhaps reliance on social associations is not a good substitute for government programs. Motor vehicle accidents are the highest risk for working adults. So spending may be needed for road safety, but if you look in the other important variables, mental health and drug rehabilitation is probably needed as well as reducing smoking and reducing poverty. Looking further at this, you can see that driving is very dangerous. For counties where the mortality rate is higher, the deaths per 100K is nearly doubled. But also other interesting features can be determined from this chart is that as wages increase, so does mortality also decrease, and that even recreational activities are also needed for adults. As you can see here in note 14, that when the access to recreational facilities is greater than 0.33, the death rate goes down over 200 points. Looking at the children and youth age group, one may think that not being proficient in English may be a major issue, but the next slide may show otherwise. One thing of interest is that the youth life expectancy is clearly better in metropolitan areas. Does lack of proficiency in English affect mortality in youth? Actually, interestingly, it has a positive effect. This may reflect a cultural factor or be evidence that correlation is not causation. Now, of interest is that exercise is very important. It accounts for 23% of the importance in the tree. And it is clear that looking at the tree, that death rates can be reduced in half by allowing more opportunities to get access to exercise. K-means clustering was undertaken to see if the country could be clustered on a county basis to see if there's large geographic areas where targeted programs could be established. Of interest, looking at first the senior cluster, you can see that the rural Midwest has the highest mortality rate. That could be an issue of access or just proximity to healthcare providers. Of note, my own house, I only live a few blocks from the emergency room, and I have actually needed to use that emergency room. Now imagine if I lived 100 miles away from the nearest emergency room. The outcome for myself when I needed to use the emergency room might have been different. And you can see that reflected with the metropolitan areas having the lowest mortality rate. Now for the adult, one thing that's interesting is that the western and metropolitan areas actually have the lowest. So it's a little bit different. And then if you look at the youth, one thing that's really interesting, along the southern border actually has the lowest mortality rate. Perhaps that's reflecting a cultural difference. Maybe Spanish-speaking communities, maybe they have a more emphasis on exercise for the youth. More research would need to be done on that topic. So for conclusions, reducing obesity and diabetes is most important for seniors. And to do that, getting active, access to parks, even education, college degrees help, and affordable and accessible housing. So money could be directed in a form of stimulus to just building parks, not unlike what Carnegie did with libraries. And taking adults, reducing motor vehicle crashes has a significant effect on mortality rates. So our aging roads and infrastructure are a large problem, as well as smoking and drugs. So treating drug use, not as a crime, but as a medical concern, offering rehabilitation, those are things that we should look at as a country. And in addition, youth, exercise, good housing. The program that Michelle Obama had for reducing youth obesity clearly is very important. This project has shown that.